Bowling is so fun. We rented a house in Mexico for a week, for a spring break week or whatever.
Sure.
In the house was a bowling,
of course there was.
2 bowling lanes.
Only 2? How did you survive with only 2 lanes?
And it was so much fun. By the end of the week, I could not move my wrist. My arm was just destroyed, but the grin never left my face.
Yep. I have the same problem. My wife leaves town for a couple weeks. Quiet, please. My wrist is really sore, but the grin would not leave my face. I couldn't remember the last time.
3, 2.
The Apple Company presents a truly terrible podcast. Welcome to Nonsense, Season 2, Episode 9. I'm Jeff Parker.
I'm Skittle.
This is our take on the week's business, tech, and entertainment headlines. This time, on State of the Union Day, we'll look at the state of electric cars.
They're terrible.
It's also Alexander Graham Bell Day. It was on March 7th that Bell was granted a patent for transmitting vocal or other sounds telegraphically. And on March 10th, Bell made the now iconic statement, "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." To which Mr. Watson replied, "New phone, who dis?"
Totally. Now, when you said it was Alexander Graham Bell Day, I'm like, oh yeah, he was the guy who invented Taco Bell.
Wouldn't that be great if you invented both of those things? That would be a portfolio I could get behind.
Mr. Watson, bring me a chalupa.
Mr. Watson, bring me the good hot sauce.
That would have been great. You know what's most crazy about this, and we should talk about this someday in more detail in the show, he submitted his patent like on the 14th of February.
Yes.
And it was granted like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, that's when the patent office worked a little faster back then.
The patent office worked a lot faster then because the phones weren't constantly ringing.
Maybe that's true. He ended the patent office's speed.
He ended their efficiency by giving them the phone and the 800 number.
People around the world now celebrate March 7th as a day of innovation and invention. Also, March 12th is the 35th anniversary of the proposal for the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee.
That's never going to go anywhere.
Originally meant to improve the flow of information for scientists at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, the proposal led the foundation for the internet as we know it today, revolutionizing how we access and share information.
Now, again, this is another segment I want to do. A lot of people don't know this, but Tim Berners-Lee, when he was in the office at CERN, his inspiration for the World Wide Web is in the office, they would pass around pictures of cats and doing funny things.
And funny little sentences written on them.
Yeah, they would just write them on in Sharpie. And he's like, I need a better way to send around these cat pictures. This is not efficient. And then that's where the World Wide Web came from, was cat pictures.
The interesting thing about Tim Berners-Lee, that original proposal was just for CERN scientists to share information. The next year, he wrote a proposal which really was the birth of the World Wide Web.
Just search and replace CERN and put in the public at large.
How's your week going?
So far, it's been great. It's been a good week. I really enjoyed going to the Lakers game with you earlier this week. That was a great game. Lovely. Thank you. It was a good game. I liked how 3 minutes into the first quarter, they're down by like 12, and I'm like, oh, fuck, we should just go now.
Oh, it did. It looked like the end was near.
Just doomed. And then they came back. It was crazy. I'm not a big basketball fan, but that was a fun game to watch. And then, let's see, I got to serve lunch to my kids' little friends at his school, and that is just a fantastic experience because you're just smiling. There's all these little kids running around. I make a shit ton of dad jokes. Almost none of the kids laugh, and certainly none of the staff working there. They're all just like rolling their eyes at me. They're just like,
they've heard them all.
My favorite is when they come up. I usually run the vegetable bar, and they have to pick what they want, and it's like carrots or celery or salad, and the kids will be like carrots, and I have a huge bowl of carrots in front of me, and I go, I'm sorry, we're out of carrots, and they just look at me like I'm a fucking idiot, and then I give them carrots.
Makes no sense.
It makes me laugh, but it's a lot of fun. How about you? How was your week?
I finally got to try the Vision Pro. You brought over your Vision Pro, and I got to put it on, and it was an amazing experience. It's rather cool. I got to go slackline walking with this woman. It looked like we were 3,000 feet in the air.
Pretty awesome.
And it's pretty cool. Yeah. I like the Rhinoceros movie. I like the Alicia Keys movie. That was quite cool. Although I wish they would go in on people. You don't really have, I don't have to be far away from everything, right? I mean, the cool thing about this technology is it's 3D. Go in. They will figure those things out. They will get new material that is really cool.
Why them? Why not us? How about we do nonsense in a full immersive...
Right, if we bought a 3D camera, we could certainly do that.
We could be the first immersive podcast where people are here with us.
Here's what I thought was interesting. After being in that, I don't know how long I was in it. It could have been too long of a time. Your eyes are focused such a short distance because those screens are what, an inch away from your eye, and it's really fatiguing fast. I was surprised at when I took it off how much I was like, oh wow,
of course,
I can't do that for long periods of time.
We didn't spend a lot of time during evolution hunting bison an inch from our face,
right?
So it's understandable. If you get that close, Jimmy doesn't survive. Anyway, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you for doing that. That was really that was quite fun. I know you had to find wherever you lost it at your house.
Yeah, and amazingly, it wasn't cracked. They took it out for you. I'm like, even money, this thing's cracked, and amazingly, it wasn't.
No, it was perfect condition. It was great. Let's get to our headlines, shall we?
Let's do it.
The EU's new competition rules are live. Here's how tech giants are responding. March 6 marks the long-awaited moment of change. It's the deadline for tech's biggest gatekeepers to comply with the European Union's Digital Markets Act, or DMA. The DMA requires powerful companies to allow more interoperability and avoid preferencing their own digital services, or physical services too, in the case of Amazon.
Yeah, sure.
It's generated disputes over which services should be included, sparked excitement among smaller companies, and resulted in changes to how companies handle fundamental parts of its business. And now, after years of debate, the rules are finally coming into force.
So my biggest complaint about the DMA has been that I feel like there was not enough of a technological voice in it.
Yeah.
Right? This is like typical non-technologists decide they want to create some policy and they write some shit down that on its surface might seem good, but usually technically has some challenges. Now, I know for a fact there were no technologists involved in this because they would have never let it be called the DMA.
Right.
DMA means direct memory access.
Sure.
And they would have been like, yeah, you just can't use those letters. Use some other fucking letters. We don't care. Put an umlaut in there. Whatever you want to do. You can't call it direct memory access. All of our brains are going to short circuit. Anyway, that's how I know. That's my proof that there's no technologist.
DMA's restrictions apply to services within these companies: Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, ByteDance, Meta, and Microsoft.
Yep.
They are the big so-called gatekeepers.
For folks that don't know, the way they define gatekeepers is kind of fascinating, right? Like you have to be giant. I think you need revenue of at least like 7.5 billion euros in the last 3 years. You need to have a market cap over 75 billion euros, and then you need to have served 45 million monthly actives for like the last, I think, 3 years, something like that.
So these rules affect almost no one.
Yeah, this is a very small subset. You have to be a massive, massive company in order for this to affect you. And then it's interesting. So I don't think we should go through all of them. There's obviously been a whole bunch of changes from these folks. The two that stood out to me, one of which we've talked about on this show from Apple, is that they now have to allow this non-WebKit based browsers.
Yes.
So third-party browsers that are not WebKit,
yes,
which I am mildly excited about. I think that's actually a good thing.
You will love the Blink browser engine. It's great.
But the thing that I didn't know, and I'm even more excited about, is that they are opening up their NFC system so that you can do contactless payment services besides Apple Pay.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that. I think that's generally a positive thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are negatives to opening up NFC. I'm optimistic that the positives outweigh the negatives. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of changes from all the big guys. Google, Amazon still seem to be a little opaque. I'm not sure what their changes are, but Google, Meta, Apple have been pretty clear on this. Interesting that ByteDance is the only non-US company that qualifies.
ByteDance is huge. Yeah.
They're huge, yeah. And look at the changes that they have to make.
What are the changes ByteDance has to make? I don't know those.
I think the biggest one is they have a sort of a data extraction tool so that you can export your data and posts and
so I can put my dances on another program that has dancing.
Sure.
I don't.
Whenever the Brazilians launch their new dance app.
Oh, that's probably going to be a good one. Wow.
Great.
Chinese dancing, who cares? Brazilian dancing, count me in.
Way more interesting.
You're right. That app came from the wrong country.
It's all in Portuguese, though. That's the only problem. Work on your Portuguese.
Epic says its iOS game store plans are stalled because Apple banned its developer account.
Like the clickbait headline on this should be something like, game developers hate this one Apple loophole. Yeah, they just ban your fucking account and you're screwed. I kind of love this. This article is interesting. You know, I hate finding myself trying to represent Apple in a happy light. This particular one is interesting to me. So Phil Schiller from Apple sent a letter to Tim Sweeney at Epic Games, the CEO of Epic Games, and he said a bunch of shit, and then he said at the end, and this is a quote, "In plain, unqualified terms, please tell us why we should trust Epic this time."
It's a Minority Report defense.
Well, no.
In our eyes, you're about to commit crimes, therefore we're arresting you now.
Well, no. Hold on. You've broken terms with us previously. Why should we do business with you again?
Explain what that was that they did.
Well, I think they've done it multiple times, but at least in the past.
There's one that got them thrown off the App Store. That's the one
they put their own payment system in, right? And Apple said, don't do this. And they said, well, we're going to fucking do it anyway.
Correct.
And this was their catalyst for the lawsuit, which ended up in Apple having to change its terms to allow other app stores and payment providers in the Apple ecosystem.
Epic prevailed in this.
So, yes, but they still broke the rules. Now, I appreciate your counter argument is, well, the court said that those rules were not valid, but they still broke the rules. They had other paths they could have taken than breaking the rules. And I think it's interesting for Apple to say, like, hey, I'm saying, why should we trust you? And then Sweeney's response is he basically said, look, we're acting in good faith. We're going to comply with all terms of current and future agreements.
Kick us off once we violate the rules.
We're going to be good players. And then, like, my understanding of this is then it was like kind of radio silence for a while, and they just nuked their developer account. And I'm like, all right, Apple, I get what you're doing here, but it doesn't seem as up and up as you would hope. Epic has been, according to Apple, I have not dug deep on this. Epic has been running around posting shit saying like, we're not going to follow the rules in the future.
I haven't seen that. I know this article.
I think it was from some Australian litigation. Yeah. I'm not across that entirely, but I still, that's where it gets a little Minority Reporty to me. Where like if they're running around saying stuff, hey, we might do this in the future, we're not going to follow this. All right, still let them on. So this is interesting to me. I think there's a lot more of this story to unfold. I can't get over we should be on the App Store and people should be able to pay however you want and you guys get nothing for it. I'm not saying what they currently do, the current sort of 1/3 is the best solution. But the idea that I should be in Walmart and Walmart should make no money selling to their customers my product, to me is broken. That doesn't make sense.
Well, I've never argued that Walmart should make no money. Walmart Keystones, basically they mark everything up 100% on most items.
Sure.
That's not unreasonable because they have so much overhead.
Sure.
They've got the stores, the staff. I mean, there's a lot to that. Yeah. Apple's version of that, if you scaled it down, Apple's overhead would be 1% or less.
Yeah, okay, it'd be some smaller number.
Wouldn't be anywhere close to 30%.
But when have we ever said in a capitalist society that your margin has to be some magic window of a proportion of your costs? I don't know what other costs you could put into this. They spend a lot of money making phones that are compelling to drag people to the App Store. To me, it's not as easy as, well, you don't have a warehouse in fucking Bentonville, so... And your counter-argument, and I think that is the most solid counter-argument, is, well, okay, where's the competition? I get that. It's the App Store competition. But the App Store, to me, isn't all of it, right? Apple still drags people into their ecosystem because of everything else.
The problem is when you are the dominant player,
I get it. You've got
these rules that everybody else doesn't have when you're not the dominant player.
I guess.
I mean, this is the Standard Oil problem.
And I guess at the end of the day, I look at this and I go, I don't think 27% is too rich. I don't think 30% is too rich. They're trying, and I think a lot of other people do. They go, it should be less.
Clearly, Epic thinks so.
Of course. So what are the other versions of this, right? And that's what I'm trying to find the other analogs. I use Walmart. I don't think Walmart is a great analog, but I do think it is a analog. There's a whole bunch of other analogs that don't work. I think Microsoft is an interesting one. Think about Microsoft software in a box. Did we pay a licensing fee when we made software in a box to Microsoft or Windows? Nope, right? Not at all. When we made software, when we made an application for Windows, none of our revenue went to Windows. They didn't distribute it either,
sure.
Right? But
which was a model that I thought was great. And Windows prospered. I mean, Windows is on a gazillion machines. I think that's a better model.
To me, that's the better analog. We should talk about this. This is a longer conversation. I think it's an interesting one that we should talk about. But I think that Microsoft analog is an interesting one because it undoes some of my view of the Apple and the App Store world. 30% whatever, payment processing, yada, yada, yada.
Speaking of Microsoft invokes VCR in motion to dismiss New York Times AI lawsuit. The New York Times is suing Microsoft because Microsoft, as primary owner of OpenAI, is basically dumping out the contents of the New York Times. Yeah. Now, they're supposedly having to reword articles, but the information is the same.
I think this analog is great. I think the
VCR. They're saying it's like taping shows off your VCR, and now I have a copy of 60 Minutes that I can sell out of the back of my van.
I think this is an actual quote from their motion. The Microsoft lawyers said, quote, despite the Times contentions, copyright law is no more an obstacle to large language model than it was to the VCR, and then in parentheticals, or the player piano, the copy machine, the personal computer, the internet, or search engines. That makes a lot of sense. At the time, when the VCR came out, it gave you an option to infringe on copyrights that you previously did not have. It was much easier to infringe on the copyrights of video content. You could just record 60 minutes and sell it out the back of your van. And we've seen this before too, right? Like you saw
the illegal use. On the VCR, you're right, because you could record things for your own personal use. That was the limitation of the VCR.
Well,
legally.
Remember they didn't want that, right? You had to fucking bring up fair use doctrine in order to make that a thing.
Yeah.
But nobody wanted that.
But that's where it landed.
Yeah, totally. But initially it didn't. Initially it wasn't like you can copy shit off HBO and rewatch it. HBO wanted you to stay subscribed to HBO to watch it on HBO.
Sure.
I look at this and I go, well, the tech is going to push the copyright law, and I think that's what we're seeing here. And I think the VCR is such a great analog for what we're seeing with OpenAI and this lawsuit from the New York Times.
It's a little different because in this case, OpenAI is selling tapes out of the back of their van.
But they're kind of not.
They are the ones who are offering the New York Times content.
But you have to ask for it. So just don't ask for it. Go after the people that are asking for it.
The fact that you have to ask for the illegal tape out of the guy's van is no different. I mean, because I'm asking for an illegal copy of 60 Minutes does not mean she has a right to give it to me.
I could ask LimeWire for, the latest Blink-182 album. Does that mean Cisco is responsible because they have a switch in the middle and they're providing the bits? Like Cisco is literally providing me with copyrighted content.
Right. What you're saying is the guy who built the van, is he responsible for the guy selling the VHS tapes out the back of the van?
Or the guy that built the VCR. are.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, OpenAI is more than that. They are the ones who are doing the offering of the program, of the material. They are offering New York Times content.
So is the van. The van is offering the copies of 60 Minutes.
The van, it just has someone in it who's doing the offering.
I'm not saying it's perfect, but I do think it holds. I really do think it's an interesting argument.
Because someone manufactures wire, they should be charged for delivering the New York Times through OpenAI, because wire is used to deliver the New York Times through OpenAI.
Yeah.
That's your argument.
Yes, it is my argument.
I'm going to think that's a little broad.
It's a little broad.
That might be a broad interpretation of who's responsible.
They go on further in this, and this is the Microsoft attorneys. They go on further and say this lawsuit improperly seeks to impose liability based, quote, solely on the design or distribution of a product capable of substantial lawful use. And I think that's the root of the argument. The root of the argument, and this is your wire argument, the majority of the use of it is legal. Can it be used to do things that are illegal? Yes. Should we put in some guardrails for that? Absolutely. Right? And we did. Remember all the bullshit we did in VCRs?
In this case, it is by design delivering copyrighted content.
It is not by design delivering that. It is
by design, if I ask it about a news story, it is delivering copyrighted content.
And if you want to make sure it's not, don't feed the New York Times into it to begin with.
Absolutely not. If I connect my VCR to another VCR to copy Stripes, it is by design copying Stripes. By design. It's taking the...
But that's an illegal thing. To connect the two VCRs is an illegal thing.
So we should not have VCRs.
It's not an illegal thing to say, tell me what happened in the Laker game the other night when the Lakers were behind by 12. And the New York Times has a story about that. And it gives me that story.
You have to look at the prompt engineering that they put into this, even in their samples in this lawsuit. It was, tell me what the New York Times said on January 3rd, 2023 on this specific topic. You're tweaking the model to give it back what's in there.
But I shouldn't be able to get the New York Times information from OpenAI, even if I ask that.
Great. So put a filter on it so that doesn't happen. That's really, which I by the way, I think is the wrong answer.
And it's so interesting, and I want to know why, but we're out of time. So enough with the headlines. Coming up next, we're going to talk about what's going on with electric cars.
Are we going to talk about their new charging system where you just you rub a balloon on your sweater and then it propels the car forward?
And that makes them go? That's perfect. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
And your kids find it funny too.
So much has changed in the last year in the electric car world that I thought on State of the Union Day, we could take a look at the state of electric cars.
Everybody buy a Cybertruck. Next segment, please. Now, can we start by giving some background here by saying I am I would self-describe as a car guy.
Correct.
I like cars.
I have no interest in cars whatsoever.
No, you're my least favorite kind of car person. Your car is transportation.
It takes me from point A to point B, and that's really all I care about. But I do like business. I do like following business.
But you just want a bubble. You just want like a Jetson bubble to take you from A to B and do it quick and efficient and cheap.
Oh, and if you can do it autonomously, even better. I don't want to steer the bubble.
No.
Yeah, that's perfect.
No, you don't want anybody steering the bubble. Yeah. Okay, good. At least everybody knows where we stand.
If you have followed the news at all in the last few months, the news makes it sound like EV sales are way, way down. There are headlines like electric cars piling up at dealer lots in 2024 and how EVs became a massive disappointment to generate all sorts of clicks. Slow sales for the Audi Q4 e-tron because Audi was going to make 10 new EVs by 2026 and they've now slammed on the brakes for that. And so it makes big headlines of electric cars not performing as expected. The Audi Q4 e-tron is a $60,000 car. And you look in that segment of the market, there are a lot of $60,000 cars. There are a lot of very expensive electric cars. In fact, the majority of the electric cars are SUVs that are somewhat pricey. If you look carefully at the Audi, though, what it is basically is a Volkswagen ID4, which is a $40,000 car. The Volkswagen ID4 is selling just fine. I mean, it's $20,000 worth of interior fit and finish. Is that worthwhile to anybody?
Yeah, I think all the existing Audi owners would say that. I mean, you can compare plenty of Audis to their VW brethren. I wanted to say the Q7 to the Atlas, but I don't think that's the same. I don't think that's the same chassis.
The ID4 is the same chassis as the Q4 e-tron.
That's been car sales forever. If you add the features are where all the margin is.
But you don't have necessarily that many people ready to spring that much for an EV.
Of course.
I mean, part of the motivation for an EV was you didn't have this, tons and tons of aftermarket costs and repair tires costs, and you didn't have to change the oil. So some of it is economic, I think. There are just too many cars in that upper segment.
Yeah, and I'm also not sure that upper segment's ready or as ready for EVs as maybe the rest, but I'm not. That's something I'm not sure
on the plus side, that upper segment probably has their own garages and can charge the cars in their own garages.
I think the next thing's going to be steam cars. We're all just going to go back to steam-powered cars. SVs, which, by the way, make a shit ton of torque. They make like infinite torque almost. Not infinite torque, but they make a terrible amount of torque at 0 RPM, which is really cool. Yeah. They have other challenges, namely that you have a giant pot of boiling water in your car at all times.
And what's causing the water to boil?
Coal. Presumably. You just shovel some coal in at the stoplight. To me, some of the pitch around early sort of EV futures was, look, less parts, less shit to break, less cost.
Less aftermarket cost.
I feel like with hard drives, like you're never going to see a hard drive for $10. There's this artificial floor to hard drives where they're just like, they're not going to sell them for less than $80.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if the size gets bigger and bigger, but you're just not going to get an old drive for less than about $80 because it just doesn't make sense. But you expected cars to be like cheaper overall. And the market was like, no, we're going to give you more things. And I'm like, but what are the more things? It's actually less things technically, right? You're technically getting less things.
I think they were out trying to scale up their profit because cars had become, such slim margins on cars.
Totally.
And I think they went to EVs and everybody thought, well, here's a chance we can really get back some fat margin. But it didn't work out that way.
Because I presume if you think about, let's talk about the pre-EV world, all the car manufacturers, whether it's BMW, Audi, Ford, GM, whatever. I got to believe they made the majority of their profit, not on the car sale, but on all the shit that came after, namely parts.
Aftermarket,
right? Not aftermarket parts, but the replacement parts, right? Like the service parts, not some shitty spoiler from Pep Boys.
No, I'm not saying that. Just repair parts, replacement parts.
So then you get the EVs, less moving parts, so less shit to break. I think the intention is the survivability of the parts is longer. I mean, electric motors, for the most part, run forever. Now what happens?
Probably everything but tires and batteries. Batteries decline in their capacity,
which they're not selling,
tires wear out.
I mean, they're not selling tires. Batteries, I think at least early on, most of them were OE, but now I got to believe that there's a lot of aftermarket options, whether it's Reclaim or companies that are remaking. They're just cells inside a big form. Anyway, I'm not sure about that, but I got to believe there's less margin and certainly less profit in the after-sale car part market for these manufacturers than there was before. That seems to hold true. I don't know. I haven't seen any data on it, but that would seem to hold true. So that says, well, if you want to make the same overall profit on a vehicle that's an EV compared to a ICE, you got to raise your margin.
You charge more.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really worked out because I think a lot of people look and go, gee, I can buy this car in an ICE version that is half the price or, a third less of the price than when I buy it in the electric version.
I mean, that was Toyota's view. Toyota's view on this was EVs aren't the answer. Hybrids are the answer. And that from an emissions perspective and a cost perspective, a hybrid is a much better path for them as a car manufacturer than EVs.
I want to do some more of these headlines before we move on to actual topics within. Yeah.
I like topics.
That's fine. We're going to ramble about it because I know you like cars. Last week, Apple bailed out of the EV business after a decade and $10 billion plus invested.
Yeah.
And that's because I think their interest was making their vehicles autonomous, and that's a really, really hard thing to do. If they were just making an electric car, they probably could have come out with a product by now.
Yes. Could they have come out with an Apple product by now?
That's the real question. You have just said something very important in a distinction because cars have decidedly non-Apple margins.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I was just saying from the product itself, forget about the margin on there. I think cars are hard, especially to build and scale them up. Tesla was obviously early. They were the first ones that was able to make this whole EV market a thing. I don't think we would be at the level of EV adoption had you not had a Tesla or a Tesla-like company.
You actually had 3 or 4 that were coming in, and Tesla just sort of got the most aggressive.
Yeah, I'm not saying it had to be Tesla, but it had to be somebody. Yeah. It wasn't going to be the GMs or the Toyotas of the world. It was going to be somebody, right? Some startup was going to do this. And then I think if you're Apple, you look at it and you go, well, okay, we're not the early guys, but we are a multi-trillion-dollar company that has to expand into other businesses if we want to continue to grow. Our car company is a bet. And it seems, 10 years ago, I would say, yeah, it sure seems like a bet.
Yeah.
I agree with you that the tech is what Apple's probably the most interested in. The rest of the car would be, knowing Apple, very Spartan, and it would only come in one fucking color and all the stupid shit that Apple does that limits your customizability. But I think I feel like their vision, I don't even know they know what their vision was the car was just this necessary means to the end being the software. Everything from infotainment to auto drive.
At least that's what it became. Yeah. At first they weren't talking at all about autonomous cars, and then by the end they were saying autonomous is the big difficulty in AI. It's the biggest problem.
Look, I'm I'm always going to type check you on that a little bit. They've never said anything about cars at all.
No, but they have talked about autonomous vehicles. There are plenty. I'll send you plenty of clips where they talk about autonomous vehicles being the big, one of the biggest problems in AI.
Which it's pretty easy to infer from that they're working on that. But I'm just saying it wasn't like they were coming out saying, "Hey, we're going to build a car," and then they came out and said,
No, they never announced it. They only announced they were shutting it down.
I think they were exactly. They only announced they're shutting down the thing that didn't exist. It's the only thing they've ever said.
Right.
Which, by the way, could just be a whole ruse to get everybody else off their game, and they're going to come out with an amazing Apple car next week. Probably not.
They could go back into the business, by the way, if they wanted to make an electric car. But there's no doubt they could make it.
Here's my view on this. You look at this multi-trillion-dollar company. They got to spend money to grow. Yeah. 10 years ago, a big market to grow into would have been vehicles, right? Electric vehicles, autonomous electric vehicles, whatever. I don't see them building an ICE car 10 years ago. I don't see them building a car that doesn't have advanced technology. So that was a market for them to grow into. Shit has changed since then, right? Cars are EVs are struggling now. I shouldn't say they're struggling. They're not growing at the rate they were before, right? They've plateaued.
That's actually not true. I actually have numbers on this.
Okay.
But what you're saying is exactly what the headlines are saying. So that's so good. Yeah. It does not surprise me that people think that
I'm misinformed.
Way. Do you want me to just give you some numbers real quick?
Please. I like numbers.
The American market for EVs is not collapsing. In the last quarter of 2023, EV sales were up 40% from the same quarter a year before, according to Cox Automotive. In fact, EV sales in the United States hit a record last year, topping 1 million vehicles for the first time. So really, sales are expanding tremendously. What they're not doing is expanding at the rate that so many car companies who came into...
Somebody had expected it to. Sure.
Yeah, came into the market all at once.
And I'm out of key here, because what I was saying was I thought they plateaued. I thought they were sort of flat-ish this year.
Not at all.
Not at all. They're still growing at some rate. Interesting. Okay, so really it's just that we as the car manufacturers, so not they outpaced demand. Right? They said, we think we're going to see bigger growth here, and they have.
You went from basically one car company. There were others, but they were really minor players. You went from one car company who was selling EVs to everyone selling EVs, and you did it so quickly where that switch was flipped. So, of course, we were just flooded with it. And plus, the other thing was, most of those EVs were in the $60,000 range, which was, for most people, that's a lot of money for a car.
Yeah. Okay, so, but now I look at, if I'm Apple, and I look at the position that they're in, and I go, well, what's a bigger market that's exploding that we should consider getting into? And it's the thing we talk about on this show every single fucking week.
AI.
They need to get into the Elon Musk business.
What's the Elon Musk business?
Just making little Elon Musks that run around and just say and do stupid things.
And just say stupid things?
Right?
Okay.
And then you can buy, so then the aftermarket, you can buy like little ketamine kits to refuel him and charge him up, and then he runs around.
Oh, nice.
No, obviously it's generative AI, which Apple hasn't done a lot with the generative AI side of things. Obviously they've done a ton with AI, series all AI powered, and has been for it seems like ever. Using the resources they had, what was the number they had in this Project Titan at the end? Like, it was over 1,000 engineers, right?
12. Yeah, they were down to 1,200. They were at one point up to 5,000.
Yeah, the majority of them were not designing seatbelt buttons.
Sure.
Right? They were working on software, and I gotta believe.
I'm sure at one point they were going after those little details, and they sort of said, let's scrap that until we can get the autonomous part working.
But the majority of them were working on the really hard parts.
Yeah.
I think the really hard parts are the software, especially around self-driving capabilities. I believe that it makes sense for them to say, let's go put more effort towards this. If they come back to cars at some point, great. If you build better generative AI, you probably have a better heads up on building better autonomous driving too at some point in the future.
I'm not sure that there's going to be a consumer car that is autonomous, that is L5 autonomous. But let's come back to that. The big thing for me at Apple is that Apple is used to 35% plus profit margins on their products. Autos are nowhere close to that. And if you have a dealership model, if you're selling through a dealer franchise model, your percentage is even lower.
Yeah, of course.
You're shaving off $1,000 worth of profit literally for every car you sell.
It's a $60,000 car that Apple's marked up to $100,000, right? To get their margin out of it, to get their 30% margin out of it. And it's $100,000 over 10 years. It's $10,000 a year.
That's the thing. If you go 10 years, maybe, but I don't think most people are going to go 10 years on a car.
I don't know. I'm not saying that's what Apple was building. I'm just saying I could see a path where they could make their margin, get the Apple margin out of it by making the duration of the vehicle longer. I can also see them coming out with an Apple SE car that's like you pedal yourself. There's no battery. Like, I got the Apple car.
Well, there are actually, we're going to come to this. There are some stunningly cheap electric cars that are out there.
You have to pedal?
Like sub 1,000. No, you don't pedal. And they're like golf carts, except for they're actually, you're in basically what is an enclosed car. I wouldn't want to get hit
I've seen some of these at like the mall, like the little pods, little like one.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this and going, man, I ride a motorcycle and I feel safer on that thing because at least people can maybe sort of see me. This thing, you're done on the ground like on an incumbent bike.
It's like a motorcycle in that if you get hit, it's probably over. I mean, I think about it'd be great to have one to do do a million errands right around in town in Beverly Hills, and it'd be great to drive something like that. Plus, you could park anywhere because they're so small. They're wonderful. But I just can't imagine what it would be like.
I can imagine what it would be like. On day one, you're making a left onto Wilshire and you get fucking steamrolled by some asshole in a Ford Excursion. Not that I know who that would be.
Before we move on to other things, one last EV, and that is that Fisker has announced they're running out of cash.
So theoretically, I may have theoretically sent support@fisker.com an email saying, may I please have my reservation money back? I'm very curious to see how they respond to that. I'm assuming I'm either going to get no response or a new phone, who dis, is going to be my response from them.
I wanted to talk about profit margins, so this is kind of a natural transition. That Rivian, every single Rivian they sell, what's a Rivian cost? Do you know
like
off the top
70,
of your head?
80, something like that, I think.
And they're losing, do you know off the top of your head how much they're losing every time they sell them?
More than $1, less than $40,000. Just less than $40,000. About $40,000. Yeah, that's rough. I mean, the theory there is that it's scale, right? You need scale in order to make up for that.
Well, that's 100% correct. If you remember, Tesla was not making money for years and years and years. They made, finally in 2020, they started making solid profits, but it took a long time to get there. And it was all about scale.
I like a lot of what Rivian's done. I think it's one of the better looking EVs for sure. I mean, some people that I really respect their opinions on cars have had very positive things to say about them and own them.
There's another car company, Chinese manufacturer BYD, which is probably in second place in terms of margins for EVs. It's the number 2 seller of EVs by volume, and they're doing around $1,500 gross margin per car in 2023.
I thought they beat Tesla on a couple metrics in terms of number of sales, like recently, like in the past month.
Not in the U.S., and here's why. We basically don't allow BYD cars in the U.S.
Nice protectionism going on there. Good job.
It is protectionism at its finest. But on the other hand, if you look at other countries who are allowing BYD vehicles in the country, basically their own manufacturers have been completely squeezed out of the market. Let me tell you about the Seagull. That's one of BD's cars.
Yeah.
It's a small hatchback. It's around the size of a Mini Cooper. It's a fast-charging electric car. It has a range of 250 miles.
But then when I take it to the beach, does it shit on me?
Maybe. BYD claims that it can go from 30% to 80% charging in a half an hour using their DC plug. It's not a luxury car, of course. It's a very small car. Power driver seat, cruise control. If you were looking for an inexpensive commuter car, this would be perfect.
Okay. Two things. One, when you lead your feature list, the lead of your feature list is cruise control and a power driver's seat. Okay, I know exactly what kind of car I'm getting into, so thank you for that.
Now guess how much it costs?
$12,000.
I'll tell you why you lead your feature list with those items. It is $10,700.
Wow, that's crazy. I pulled up pictures of this thing. I've never seen it until you just mentioned it. It's kind of a handsome car for a little commuter car.
100%.
It's not terrible.
And you can get in and out of it. It's not that, you get into a Cooper, a Mini Cooper, it's a little hard. But get into this thing, it's not bad. I've driven the Fiat, which I actually really enjoy.
I like the Fiat.
But again, it's it's for someone who's my age. It's not easy to get into necessarily. Let me go back and talk about BYD's sales. They sold 0.5% of the EVs in Europe in 2019.
Okay.
Europe opened the door and they sold 0.5% of cars.
I'm guessing this number went up.
They're already over 9% as of last year.
That's crazy.
They make cheap, reasonably good quality cars that people are eager to buy, and that's a magical recipe. China has some distinctive advantage because they control the upstream materials supply chain for lithium batteries. So even if your battery's built by Panasonic in a plant in the U.S., the raw materials for it still came. They were processed and refined in China.
I mean, I've heard nothing but good things about some of the, like the GV60, which I think is the Hyundai that people rave about and say it's a great car. And it's also like a smaller crossover size vehicle.
I want to talk real quick about autonomous technology.
Yes, please.
We teased it just for a second in there. And here's why I think it is unlikely that you are going to get L5 cars anytime soon in consumers' hands. Currently, you have L4s that are taxis. The Waymos are L4. Yep. They're not quite L5 because there's a human who is paying attention in a remote control center somewhere.
Yeah.
But you will get to L5. You certainly have gotten to L4 because you can throw an infinite amount of money at hardware.
Okay.
That is to say, you can put LiDAR sensors flashes all over these things.
Yep.
LiDAR is lasers that are detecting distance of objects all around it. It's doing it 2,000 times a second. The Tesla is trying to not use LiDAR.
Yep.
LiDAR is lame, Elon Musk says. And they're using a vision-based approach, which is much, much cheaper. And so that's why your Tesla is L2, because they haven't what they call solved the vision problem.
Yeah, but L2
it doesn't give you the same information that a LiDAR system can give you.
Sure, but L2 is fully self-driving.
Not so much.
It says right on it. It says full self-driving. It says Tesla full self-driving.
Yeah, and go ahead and do that. It'll drive you right into a phone pole.
It'll drive right into the fucking sign at the Beverly Hills Hotel is what it'll do.
Oh, it did. It drove a guy right into the... into the Beverly Hills Hotel.
He asked it to take him to the Beverly Hills Hotel, and I was like, okay, watch this.
Take you right into the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Hold my beer.
Yeah, that was crazy. That picture was crazy.
Yeah, I guess what you're getting at is because you have this increased cost on the vehicle of LiDAR, you can do that in a taxi because you're spreading
because
out.
The taxi's always in use. It's never sitting silently in your garage doing nothing.
Sure.
And so it doesn't really matter that you throw expensive hardware into it. It does matter to a certain degree, but nothing like what it matters on a consumer car.
Sure. I mean, I'd be very happy when I think about a vehicle as transportation, which unfortunately is what I get to do with most of my time in a car these days is transportation. I don't get to go for a ride and enjoy it on Mulholland or up to Ojai.
Yeah.
It's just fucking transportation. And if I could buy like a timeshare into a Waymo-esque L4 or L5 vehicle, I would consider that. Not a single vehicle, but like a fleet of vehicles. I would do that. I mean, that was sort of what I think wasn't it the Uber One pitch years ago, where like you're basically spending some flat amount per month and they're giving you rides to and from work or whatever, like some sort of fixed cost to do the things you need to do a la carte.
I don't even mind, if there is you and I are going to go on the Waymo service shortly, and we're going to talk about it as we do it, because those Waymo cars really, the LiDAR really does make a massive amount of difference in the experience. The car is so much safer with LiDAR. Now, what Elon Musk will say is that once you solve vision, LiDAR is useless. Okay. But the problem is, I'm not sure it's even possible.
You haven't solved vision.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's even possible to solve vision. He's right. If you could solve vision, suddenly you can very inexpensively make an L4 theoretical
I'd argue
car.
It has to be solvable. Why would I argue that it has to be solvable?
Because people do it. But people driving is really unsafe. Look at the statistics on Waymo's crashes versus a regular human driver. The Waymo is far, far safer. And I think once you get used to that much safety in your transportation,
it's hard not to.
You're never going to want to go back.
And that's a pretty fair point. I mean, you look at vehicles over time, just regular, whatever, ICE vehicles, all of them, they have, thanks to regulation, I think primarily, they have just gotten significantly safer year over year. And at some point you're just like, we're not going back. Like, you're not going to go back to, you know what, this shoulder belt's not really important. We don't need these airbags.
Take these out. We've gotten better at so many things, even before you start taking into account safety measures.
Yeah.
The quality of the metals that we use, the weight
point.
of the metals we use, where we choose to put that weight in the car. I mean, it's really remarkable how much we've advanced. It's unfortunate the electric car went away in the early 1900s, because we could have been tweaking out how electric cars work instead of cars that will basically go away. I want to talk about one more thing before we go real quickly, and that is the fact that neither you nor I own an electric car, yet we're both fans. Why don't we have one?
Well, I already have, I don't know, I only know the formal Latin medical term for it. Too many fucking cars. So I'm trying to not get more cars. You do basically have a used car. It's not important. It's like root canals and where my Vision Pro is. These are things that are not important to talk about. They're like gremlins, or they're like mogwai. They're definitely like mogwai. If you water them at night, they multiply.
They breed.
Or you feed them. I don't remember what it is. But there's the shit you don't do to them. And I do all of those things.
And your neighbors love that, right?
Oh, yeah. My neighbors definitely love that.
They like that you keep all the cars.
Yes. Yeah.
Very popular in Southern California.
My neighbors are a big fan of my car stashing around the, like, I'll just eyeball my backyard and be like, I can fit another car in there. No problem. Sure. Why not?
How long until you get the hangar at Santa Monica Airport?
Me and Jerry. I'm gonna have my little space next to Jerry. I should just start leasing the buildings next to Leno and just start putting my collection there. My neighbor, who I don't think listens to this show, likes to remind me that I'm Fred Sanford
with all the cars,
and that it's just cars everywhere. I'm very good at buying vehicles that I like, and I'm not good at selling vehicles that I like. So you can see how this gets out of control real fast. I don't need any more vehicles. I would consider, and actually am probably going to buy an electric vehicle soon-ish as a screw around town vehicle.
I keep looking at it myself. I've been looking at that Ford,
the Mach-E.
Yeah, which to me looks great, and they just majorly lowered prices on it because they're trying to get competitive.
They're super nice. They're really really nice. And I think for somebody like you especially, it would check all the boxes.
I think, yeah.
It does everything you needed to do. I've been looking at, and I will likely get a BMW i3, which they no longer make. I like it because it's tiny, and I want it for just scooting around town with the kids and taking my kids places. It's a BMW. It's a very well-made BMW, and they're going for a song right now because nobody wants them.
Right.
Now, I'm buying one used. I'm buying one in the secondary market. You can find single owner, super low mile, still CPO, so you can still get a warranty on it.
We haven't talked about used prices in EVs falling as much as they've fallen, but that's largely a function of new electric vehicle prices. It just drives down the price
of all
the used ones. Yeah.
Still demand for them.
Sure.
And maybe I'm getting one that's 3 years old and the battery life is down to 85%. Again, don't care. Range isn't the issue. You can also get them with you can get them with a little generator pack built in that's called a range extender that will just charge the battery while you're driving around.
For me, the big holdback has been what's called the green premium, is they're just charging too much for premium. What you're getting. And so why would I bother until you get rid of that green premium? I mean, it's nice for you that you think you're going to make your fat margins, but it's also nice for me to think that I'm just going to keep my money in my pocket.
Yeah, and I think that's coming real soon, probably this year.
There are tiny electric cars, as we said, that are $900.
The Seagulls? Yeah, but they poop all over you.
This is not the Seagull. No, this is a different car that's $900.
Oh, the little death traps. Yeah, they're coffins. They're coffins with wheels on them. They self-bury you. It's not L2, it's L2 Plus, and after you get in a car accident, it just drives you right to the crematorium and just dumps you in.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a really nice feature.
They're basically like golf carts. I mean, they're little small electric engines, but for tooling around town, they're probably fine, provided you're not going to go on any streets where you're going to get in a crash.
I don't want to get all pedantic on you, but since you do it to me all the time, you fucking English major. Small electric motors. There are things about electric cars that I dislike because of nostalgic reasons, but are great opportunities going forward, namely the sound or lack thereof.
Yeah, lack thereof is an issue.
Now, have you been around the Audi e-tron?
Yeah, sure.
That sounds almost as good as the best sounding ICE, internal combustion engines out there. It sounds so cool. They took all the amazingness of a V8 engine and combined it with the Jetsons and made it sound incredible. And every time I see one, I just smile. Those and the what's the Porsche version? The Taycan. The Taycan is also awesome.
Sure. That's a great sound.
So the guys at Lotus, 10 years ago, came with a little system that was just, RPM dependent and you could load different sounds on. And I remember talking to them and I was like, it'd be really cool if you had you got Wi-Fi deployed and little GPS. What if Beverly Hills could say, today is Jetsons Day and all the cars sound like the Jetsons? How cool. They'd be like public art, right? If all the cars sound like the Jetsons, or today's V8 Day and they all sound like V8s. It'd be really fun if you're in these areas and again, like a public performance almost. But
so in any case, there's an awful lot of cases with electric cars right now. Even there's so many available, you're paying a lot and you're getting not very much. The Audi's Q5, the hybrid SUV got well below average marks from consumer reports for reliability. Engine problems, electrical systems, comfort features, all sorts of problems. The plug-in variant of Chrysler's signature minivan, the Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid, same problem. It scored 14 out of 100. Even Tesla's Model 3 was full of issues, from touch screens to body panel alignment, paint defects, loose trim, glitchy interfaces.
That's probably the first hybrid Pacifica. So give Chrysler a couple iterations to get it nailed down, I would think.
Well, they've been making cars for a while. This is not
they've been making
the first
shitty cars for a while.
Made. Yeah. It's not the electric motors in these cars. This is the problem. Largely, the electric motors are fine.
Well, those are 180 years old. They haven't gotten any better. They're as efficient as they're ever going to be. They're 98%
no, they've gotten a lot better. You know what's made them better?
Have they really?
Yeah. Rare earth metals.
Rare earth metals.
Yes.
Like magnets. How do those work?
It requires less weight and volume to make magnets more powerful.
Interesting.
And therefore you're getting more efficiency out of your electric engine.
So we've made the magnets stronger in the motors, and that makes the motors more efficient. Is that what you're going to tell me?
Correct. And this is part of the advantage China had, because a lot of those rare earth metals were coming from China. Now it turns out there's loads of them in other places in the earth.
Okay.
Sweden has a whole bunch of them, but those rare earth metals will not be available for 10 years, because now that they've discovered it, there's a lot of environmental clearances they're going in Sweden.
Sure.
Let's talk real quick about emissions in these cars.
Yes. Terrible polluters.
A lot of people were very motivated to get one of these things because of emissions. I would liken it to a friend of mine likes to make ice cream using liquid nitrogen.
Okay.
And that's great fun, right? If you've ever done it, it's really cool. But he's very excited and he says, see, it saves so much energy because I'm making the ice cream using liquid nitrogen instead of using this freezer, which uses all this electricity.
I'm assuming he gets the nitrogen off of his nitrogen tree that's in the backyard and just goes out and shakes that, and then liquid nitrogen just rains down and he just catches it in a cup.
You're using just as much energy. You're just using it at a different time.
I
That's
do not
the only
believe
difference.
that he's he's using as much energy. I believe he's using way more fucking energy to make liquid nitrogen and transport it.
But the most important part of that is you're just not using it at the same time as you were using the electric energy.
Yeah. Same problem with EVs, right? Like there's a coal plant behind it and they're like, it's an electric car. And you're like, yeah, well, what's behind
Your car is zero emissions, but the fact that you go to Harris Ranch and fuel it up and Elon Musk has a giant extension cord leading to, do you remember this?
No.
To a giant diesel generator
I do
across the freeway. Your car's no longer zero emissions.
Well, that was, don't look here. Okay, let's set aside the problem of there is some environmental impact from harvesting these metals, right? Not just the damage that you do to the environment by pulling them out of the earth, but also by transporting them around. Let's set that aside for a moment and just pretend that doesn't exist. You still have the vehicle, which is now using this electricity that when you plug into the car, there's no emissions, right? There's no emissions. There's nothing negative that happens. A little bit of heat.
To get it from solar panels or something else like that, yes, you are truly zero emissions. But it's possible to be zero emissions with an electric car. It is not possible with an ICE car.
But you do have, yes, of course, unless you're downhill and you turn off the engine and there's a tailwind.
Sure.
So don't tell me it's not possible. Okay, it's fucking possible. So, but it depends on the source of the energy is your point, right? It depends on what, like if it's coal that's firing it or a diesel generator or even like a natural gas turbine, that's not as optimal as something that's renewable. I do view this as a chicken and egg problem. It's going to be harder to get that renewable energy until you have the demand for it. And so I'm certainly pro using more energy because you have the opportunity to make it cleaner. Like we're not putting reactors in cars anytime soon, but we might put a reactor out to generate power somewhere.
Sure.
So that feels like the right path.
I agree. And the fact that there is a possibility of zero emissions should be enough to motivate all of us to want to move to an electric car as opposed to an ICE vehicle. Think about the California high-speed rail for a second.
Oh, crap. Here we go.
What kind of emissions are coming off of that? Think about the distance that travels and how fast that travels.
Yeah.
Is that better? Is that better for the state or electric cars better for the state?
Well, I would assume you have an efficiency in the train, so it will be like less energy per person mile moved, assuming people actually get on the thing.
It's a vast efficiency. It's enormous. Also, all of the electricity...
Is it like 2 orders of magnitude, 100x?
All of the electricity is coming from a solar plant.
That's built alongside the train. Like they basically made it net neutral.
Alongside. Yes, it is absolutely zero emissions. The electric cars that you're building come nowhere close to that.
Again, zero emissions, but I also, like in operating mode, I still want to know what's the debt that you paid by making the solar panels. Like I feel like everything should come with
about a year, depending upon the energy source that it's substituting.
Is it about a year? So about a year of operational use. And
by the way, it's the same thing for moving all those metals around to make the electric car. The break even on that environmentally is about 1 year. If you use your car,
I thought it was about 6 years. It's 1 year.
It's about 12 to 20,000 miles, depending upon what car it's substituting for.
Huh.
Even so, electric engines are vastly more efficient than petroleum engines. So electric cars emit much less per mile travel.
I mean, heat loss alone, like something like, I'm going to quote a number that I'm sure is going to be wrong, like 80+% of the energy that goes into an internal combustion engine is lost as heat.
Correct.
Like that's insane when you think about how much energy is just going out as heat. I mentioned earlier, I wanted to buy a small electric car for just getting around town. Part of the reason for that is I don't ever want to have to think about fueling it.
Oh, it's wonderful. That's a huge advantage.
It's got a very short range. I've already put in service. I'll have to upgrade the service. I've already put in service for one of my many trailers that I store in the front of my home. So I can repurpose that for the car charging. And then you just want to have it always topped off. I don't care that it only has a 180 mile range. I'm never going more than 40 in a sitting. It's just not going to happen.
Oh, yeah. All right, we have to get out of here, but quickly before we do, have you seen or read anything good this last week?
This last week?
That's the one that we're interested in, and usually,
I'm very proud of myself, by the way, because I have something legit that I saw, and I can share today for the first time. What is this? We're season 2, episode 9. Is that where we are?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Finally, I feel like I've got a legit thing to share on something I've seen that's not my kids.
You've had legit things before.
Have I? Oh, that's the kindest thing you've ever said to me.
No, that's true.
No, this was actually sent in from a listener who is also a fellow sort of OG F1 fan. It's a video that shows how and why the fastest filming drone was built. Huh? This amazing drone built by Ralph Hogenberg, the whole of the Dutch drone gods team. They designed one to keep pace with Red Bull's new F1 car for the season. This is the RB20, which is super, super cool. And they went through a couple trials figuring this out. This is all like behind the scenes footage. They flew the drone. They're like, straight lines, no problem. But getting this thing to turn and change direction and follow an F1 car, not trivial.
It's amazing the pilot can do that. I mean, forget that the drone can do that. Once you get the drone so it can do it, it's really amazing that the pilot can do it.
And they get this awesome video at the end of them on a practice lap following Max Verstappen around, I think it was Silverstone, and flying over like this guy had to dodge bridges, and it's really compelling, and it was in the wet, so they're not going quite as fast, but more interestingly, you're getting these huge rooster tails behind the car.
But also remember, the drone is also flying through the wet. There's wet in the sky that the drone is dealing with.
Thank you for reminding me how rain works. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, sure.
Great. Rain comes from clouds and falls through the sky into the ground. That's great. No, it's super fun. I'll put a link in the notes, and if you're a Formula One fan or a drone fan or just like cool photography and videography, it's super neat.
Awesome.
How about you?
Somebody feed Phil. Put Phil Rosenthal, the creator of the TV show Everybody Loves Raymond, in uncomfortable situations, funny costumes, and feed him the best cuisine a given location has to offer. That's a recipe for a delightful television show. Add in very knowledgeable or humorous guest stars, and you'll understand why this show is in its 7th season. Phil's brother produces and occasionally appears on the show, and their parents were recurring characters until they passed, making us all feel part of the family. Somebody Feed Phil, season 7 on Netflix now.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's hilarious.
That's awesome.
He's a very witty human being.
I've heard nothing but good things from the show, from you and from others. So as a fan of food and eating, which are my 2 favorite things, I will check that out.
That is the episode.
Thank you for joining us for All This Nonsense, truly terrible podcast from The Awful Company. Visit us on the web at nonsense.productions. I'm Jill.
I'm Jeff Parker.
If you like this program, please follow, download, subscribe, and like at Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, AntennaPod, iHeartRadio, Spotify, My Favorite, Overcast, or wherever you may get your podcast from.
Or just go to the podcastindex.org. They have a list of all kinds of cool apps that use their amazing podcast index. Special thanks to our floor director, Richard Parker.
Thank you, Richard. We'll be here every Thursday morning for more nonsense. Please join us.
DirecTV synchronous or asynchronous?
I'm going with yes, synchronous orbit.
No.
Fuck. This is like answering C on the multiple choice. If I just answer C on all of them, I'm bound to get it right. If I just say yes. DirecTV's not in synchronous orbit?
No, I'm making it up. I have no idea what
you fucker. You fucker.